for many years.
Well done, Peter. Carry on.
So I work in transport planning. So buses, sustainable transport is something that I get involved with regularly. We do have a bus service that serves the village, but we do have issues in terms of frequency, evenings, weekends, and also destinations.
Yes. Ian McNabb.
Hello, I'm Ian McNabb, Langport Town Council. I worked many years ago for community transport, and so my particular interest is small buses, affordable transport for people who really, really need it. So that's me. Thank you.
Right. I'm going through the list of people who haven't got cameras on, but I think some of you have already introduced yourself, and I'm just trying to catch up. Jeff Chapman, did you introduce yourself? Okay. And I have somebody called Rob's iPad. Rob, are you?
Yeah, that's me. I'm Rob Toms from Broadway Parish Council.
Yes.
Joined the Parish Council only in the summer. This is the second meeting I've been to with this. Probably similar to other people. I think very limited bus services in the village, and not much, really, too much in the way of regular connectivity to either Ilminster or Taunton or Chard. That said, also conscious as well that when we tried to get some feedback from sort of people in the village, there wasn't really much of a response. So I'm not going to be one saying, demanding best bus services if there's not going to be much take up for it or demand.
Peter Simmons.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry that no picture, but I'm enjoying watching the progress. As I discussed briefly with Tony earlier, I'm a member of Somerton Town Council. I elected myself to be bus champion, and nobody else was interested at the time. We have, from September, got a better bus timetable back than before. And so I simply want to say that that's great. It's a very interurban service, Taunton, Yeovil and Wells. It's great during the hours of the day, nothing in the evening, nothing on Sundays. The buses in Yeovil don't go to the stations. The bus in Taunton doesn't go to the station. And the bus in Wales doesn't go to the station either, does it?
Because there isn't one.
Thank you. Thank you.
One.
Lee Fletcher.
Hi, I'm Lee Fletcher. I'm a coordinator with Option 24/7, which is Wiltshire's county-wide bus user group. Also helping Somerset Bus Partnership. We've got a similar structure to the one you're trying to set up in terms of the representatives, and basically here to provide any help and assistance that I can.
Thank you, Lee. Linda, Pigott VJ.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Linda VJ, both County Councillor for Ilminster Division and District Councillor for South Somerset, and currently the Conservative Group Leader for South Somerset. But some of you may be aware that with effect from January the 1st, I am standing down from both positions. However, I will still be interested in attending meetings because, like others before me, I do agree that we do need to do something about the bus service. Thank you.
David Redwell, do you want to do a quick introduction, or we'll hear from you later? And Jevon Smith, who is travelling the country, I gather, by bus. Do you just want to say a word or two?
Yes, I'll get that right in a minute. I just unmuted myself. I'm currently on a diverted 19, interestingly, and the service is just having to go on a quick speech. I work for City of Bristol College, having been suspended for 2 years, nearly in the end of the month, in the weeks coming, that is. Yes, I work as a travel buddy for City of Bristol College, and just get myself back on camera. Yes, and I do work as a travel buddy helping out the disabled sector, as you can tell from my lanyard, which is another reason I've not got a mask on, because I have epileptic seizures. Should I get masked, I could go into an unconsciousness and then people not understand what goes on. So this is why I use a bus and cannot mask and drive a car at the same time, as I cannot mask because I could have an epileptic seizure should a fit arise. I use public transport around the country, and like I'm doing today, I've done a very big tour, including Somerset, believe it or not. I've done down to Wales on a 376, onto Yeovil on a 77, where I pictured a mass of leaves in Yeovil bus station. I just couldn't believe my eyes, gathered right at the very top end where service 1, I think it is, boards, near the exit of vehicles. And then I continued on an X10 to Sherborne. Then I did a train from Sherborne to Salisbury, swapped onto another up to Bath Spa. Now I'm on service 19, all the way out to Cribbs Causeway before continuing a 3 back into Bristol and then a 376 back home.
Lovely
So
to
I'm
have
doing
you.
a very big bit today.
Lovely to have you with us. I'm not sure if I've missed anyone. Neil Parsons has just joined us. I don't know if you're settled and you're there, Neil, and you want to introduce yourself. I asked everybody just to give us a minute saying who you are, where you're from, and what you think of buses, or you can contribute to buses in South Somerset.
Okay, hi. I'm Neil Parsons. I'm from Buckinghamshire St Mary Parish Council. This is my first meeting, so hi everyone. At present, I don't have too much to add to it. I'd like to hear obviously what everyone else has to say about their various routes. I also put it out to my parish council and asked what their views were. Much the same, like you say, the buses are very empty in the area at present. I would like to say probably in the last 18 months, it might be due to COVID and how much they've been running, which is obviously impacting. But yeah, I'd like to see what everyone else has to say. So yeah, hi everyone.
Hi. Sorry, Neil, you've missed most of them, but we'll have an open time at the end of the
No problem.
meeting. Have I missed anybody?
You missed me.
Sorry, Jonathan.
That's all right. I'm Jonathan. I've recently become the vice chairman of the Marston Magna Parish Council. As a disabled member of the Somerset community, I am very concerned that our bus service is rarely disabled adapted. We have quite a large number of families here that are suffering poverty, need access to the food bank. The cost of the bus service, I feel, is very high here, taking us into Yeovil. We're talking £5 or £6 for a return of less than 10 miles. And these families are really struggling, and the lack of the bus service here and the cost is adding to the problems that they've got.
Right, thank you, all of you. I will be asking people like Jonathan if they're willing to take on a wider role of a particular theme across the county, because we will want to highlight problems that disabled people have, and we will be asking for experts who actually know what problems really are by being users. To some extent, that was all a bit backwards, because what I'm going to do now is ask Peter to explain how we've got to where we are. In April this year, the government came out with a bus back better strategy, a national bus strategy, which we've been asking for ages. And it seemed to include in it the need for consultation. And I said, What consultation? There is no group of bus users, or there are one or two little ones, but nothing across Somerset. So I had this idea that we would set up the Somerset Bus Partnership. And as Peter said right at the beginning, we found a co-chair for each district. And we started putting this group together. So I'd like Peter to go through how we've got from there to where we are today, and then we can talk about where we go next. Peter.
Thank you, Tony. It's been quite a journey. We've had good news and bad news on that journey, and we keep on getting good news and bad news. So South Somerset area, you know very well. And as David Rudgewell will emphasize later on, and it applies to all the districts, it's not just about the buses within South Somerset, it's about the cross-border buses into other parts of Somerset, but also buses, as I'm sure will come up, into Dorset and elsewhere. So, the story so far. Well, it wasn't a very happy beginning to this story, because I think, as we've heard this evening, Somerset's bus track record is one of the worst in the country. That, to a significant degree, is the result of the rural nature of the county, which makes it very difficult for commercially viable bus services to operate. There are obviously many routes which are commercially viable, but inter-urban routes with a lot of countryside in the way, or servicing small villages, those sorts of routes do really require some support funding. And if we didn't start off well in 2010, by the beginning of COVID in 2020, over those 10 years, bus journeys in Somerset had fallen by 43% from 2010 to 2020. It was just about the steepest decline in the whole country. And a contributor to it was the fact that Somerset County Council's government funding had been slashed during the period of austerity, and they had to make choices. And the choices they made, which were made, I'm sure, for all the right reasons, didn't include prioritizing funding buses. And so we saw significant cuts in 2010, and again in the middle of the decade. In fact, bus usage declined even faster in the second half of the decade than it did in the first half. And it was particularly for evening services and Sunday services in the urban areas that we saw the steepest cuts. Bus journeys per head in Somerset are lower than in nearby rural counties, and they've also fallen more sharply than our neighbouring rural counties. So it's not just about being a rural county. Somerset has performed particularly poorly in relation to our neighbouring councils.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at a DFT chart, which came out about a month ago, they list all the local authorities in the country, and Somerset, it has the second lowest number of bus journeys per head in the country. We didn't always be anything like that low down, but that's where we are in 2021. And perhaps not surprisingly, Somerset's bus services have the lowest satisfaction score of any local transport authority in the country. And that's recognised by Somerset. They acknowledge it in the 180-page report they produce for the bus service improvement plan, which we can talk about later on. And I said there are ups and downs. We're on a downer at the moment. If we look at buses currently, and we've heard about bus usage, particularly at the moment, being disappointingly low on many routes. That's in no small measure down to COVID. I mean, for many, many months, we had the government advising against using any form of public transport. That went on for about a year, telling people it was dangerous because of COVID to go on public transport. They've stopped actually saying that, but clearly with Omicron now on the scene, that's made everybody feel uncertain because nobody's too sure how serious that latest wave is going to be. So currently bus passenger numbers are about overall at about 70% of pre-COVID numbers. Why that's significant is that bus funding assumes that they would be at 80% of pre-COVID numbers. So bus operators are really feeling the pain. And then on top of that, they've had lots of their drivers seduced away to go and drive trucks because of big inducements to move from driving a bus to driving a truck. And they've also been faced, as everyone who goes to the petrol stations knows, with escalating fuel costs. And because a lot of people have moved from public transport into cars, bus operators are faced with huge traffic congestion, possibly worse than the country in terms of getting worse, is Bath, where they've also unfortunately had to do some major roadworks, but lots of problems. But the good news is Bus Back Better. Now this came along in only March of this year. It's the result of really Boris Johnson pushing for better buses in the country. He used to be Mayor of London. He saw what buses do for people in London. And it costs a lot less to improve the bus services than it does to build HS2, vastly less than to build HS2. And bus improvements can happen very, very quickly. I mean, in the space of a few months, you can transform bus services, whereas it takes 20, 30 years to build a major railway line. So to a politician like Boris Johnson, buses were a very, very attractive proposition. As he said, I love buses. We all love buses, I think, on this call, so we're with them on that. But as Tony's mentioned, we realized that if there was money on the table, we wanted to try and influence where that money was directed. And we didn't just want to leave it to the professionals and their consultant to make those decisions. We wanted to get bus users and potential users, their voices heard. Which is why Tony initiated the Somerset Bus Partnership and why people have joined the Somerset Bus Partnership. It's making sure local voices are heard on buses in Somerset, because local voices haven't had a lot of weight over the last 10 years in Somerset, but now there was money on the table in government funding and the prospect of government funding, it seemed really sensible to try and get some community-led views on what should happen to our buses. And really quite remarkably, I was talking to actually the town clerk of Frome this morning, and I told him that in the space of 6 months, we've got over 100 local area representatives across Somerset. And he was absolutely astonished that the the Somerset Bus Partnership could have taken off at such a speed. And it's not credit to the Somerset Bus Partnership, it's credit to the interest in buses at a local level, at parish council level. It's at parish council level that council is here, what buses are needed, what the problems come from not having buses, not having an evening service, not having a regular bus service. And it's that message that we need to get across to Somerset. So Somerset has set up the Bus Advisory Board and the bus user and stakeholder group, something called the Bus. Appropriately enough, both Tony and I and my two co-chairs are on both boards. The Bus Advisory Board is the one which involves the bus operators, and the bus user and stakeholder group is very much the one which is designed to reflect local opinions and user opinions. So what are the purposes of the Somerset Bus Partnership? Well, as many of you will have heard, if you talk to bus operators, they will tell you, use it or lose it. And we believe that as well. So a very important role for our bus champions, our local area representatives, anybody who cares about buses, is to help people use the bus. And one of the simplest things is just making sure there is a current bus timetable up at the local bus stop or bus shelter. Now, that might not be the parish council's job, but the reality is for many buses that are running, not all of them, but for many, that job isn't being done by anybody else. And if you get to a bus stop and if there is a bus timetable up, it's out of date. I mean, that is the most damaging thing to ever get anybody to start to use the bus. So if you can get some sellotape and you can go and stick up a bus timetable on your local bus stop, it's a very simple thing, but it's also a very useful thing. Some people in parts of Somerset have also taken on the responsibility for cleaning the bus shelters. Actually, in South Somerset, I drove through South Somerset about 10 days ago, bus shelters are in far better condition than there are in other parts of Somerset. So it may not be necessary, but it's about encouraging and facilitating and empowering people to go on the bus. So anything you can do to stimulate the use of the bus, so much the better. And it's an important role, even though it doesn't necessarily be the most effective role in terms of getting extra funding, but it is a crucial part of and a crucial role that the Somerset Bus Partnership needs to do. But at the same time, we're going to campaign for proper funding of buses in Somerset. Yes, money from the government, but also more funding from Somerset. So along came Somerset 6 months ago. They appointed one of the best consultancies in transport in the world, WSP, and their consultants have been working with the team at Somerset to develop a bus service improvement plan, a BSIP. The document is a really interesting read. It's got lots of well-researched information. And it was submitted at the end of October to the Department of Transport with a bid for funding from government. Immediately afterwards, an enhanced partnership, which is primarily Somerset County Council working with the independent commercial bus operators to agree a partnership approach to bus operations across the county, which is a totally different way from the deregulated system that we've had for some 30 years. This is a huge step forward that Bus Back Better has brought. And discussions are ongoing, not just with us, but also with bus operators around the country, with the local transport authorities like Somerset. And key statement from the Somerset BSIP, the Bus Service Improvement Plan, is a recognition of just what needs to be done. The Somerset BSIP is an ambitious plan, they say, focused on revitalising the local bus network, halting and reversing the decline in local bus passenger use, supporting our climate emergency strategy, meeting the aspirations of our key stakeholders and public, and making Somerset a centre of excellence for rural transport. And this from a county which doesn't have a great track record, but is clearly a vision of where this new BSIP is saying the county should go. So the Somerset Bus Partnership totally supports this approach. And we've written to the Prime Minister, we've written to the Transport Minister, we've written to all our Somerset MPs, and I know some of you will share the same MP as I do up in near Frome, which is David Warburton. I've worked with David Warburton over many years on buses. I know he's a big supporter of buses, so anything you can do to lobby David Warburton about buses, I think you'll find he's quite receptive. And we've asked them to back the Somerset BSIP bid, as we do. And when they say it's ambitious, there is no understatement about that. Because Somerset is asking for £165 million. You might have heard David Redwell just in the introduction to the meeting saying that the money to fund all the BSIPs around the country is oversubscribed 5 times. It's one of the reasons why it's important to lobby our MPs. Are we going to let the red wall Tory MPs in the north grab the money, or can we not ask our predominantly Conservative MPs in Somerset to argue the case for Somerset for getting a generous settlement? But £165 million over 4 years is a lot of money. It's just over £40 million a year. And as I mentioned, it's oversubscribed. And so there is a question mark as to how big will be our allocation. And we're not sure. It could be this month or it could be next month when we hear just how much money Somerset will get. But I think the really important thing in this BSIP is that Somerset has told the government that to get its bus services up to standard, the county needs £165 million over the next 4 years. That's not the Somerset Bus Partnership saying that, though we don't disagree for one moment. That is Somerset County Council saying we need £165 million, and they put an ambitious bid forward. What is less encouraging is that it has been said by a very charismatic leader of Somerset that all the policies and deliverables set out within the BSIP are subject to additional funding being provided. I've been in meetings and have asked him twice if there would be any way that Somerset would fund extra subsidies and funding in the county. And so far he's said no, but politicians can change their mind. And perhaps they need to, because when you look at how much Somerset is currently spending each year, they've just asked the government for 165 million and they're spending less than £3 million themselves. And when you look at how much their spending in relation to our neighbouring rural councils, we'd need to increase our spend per head by about 40%. Admittedly, Dorset spends even less, but Somerset needs to increase its funding to match the spend of other rural neighbouring counties. So there is a battle to be fought. There is information to be had. And one of the most important things is, if I think most of you will have had this template, if you could try and complete it. It's not a long form to complete. If you haven't got it, or it's got lost in your inbox somewhere, then let us know and we can easily send you another. By the way, if you could, please do put your emails into the chat. It just helps us follow up on who's been in the meeting. So please do put your email addresses in the chat, and ideally the parish that you live in. So tell us what the specific issues are in your village or in your parish or in your town, and then that allows us to coordinate it and look to see where we've got similarities and common interests with neighbouring villages and so forth. Coming back to it, do encourage the use of your local buses. It's so important to get people back onto buses. Awful lot of people out there who used to travel by bus and they've stopped doing it. Buses are important. They're important for the climate emergency. But as we've heard this evening, there's another aspect to why Bus Back Better was brought in by this government. It's part of their levelling up agenda. There are a lot of disadvantaged people, either financially disadvantaged, they don't own a car. Of course, most county councillors have cars because it's very hard for them to get to council and back from council meetings without cars. It's probably more parish councillors who depend on buses. Anyway, we need to get the use of buses up and enthused. Another thing you can do, I think many districts around Somerset are sort of seeing too many planning applications coming in. Each planning application has a travel plan, and there is Section 106 money or SIL money with larger developments. That money can be used to help fund, stimulate, open up bus routes, and local councillors, parish councillors should pressurise their district councils to use that funding to help public transport. And to campaign for better funding. This gets into the political area, but it's not a party political area in terms of there are good ones and bad ones. At the moment, none of the parties in Somerset have really taken up the cudgels about bus funding. And so whatever party you're in, the argument needs to be put that Somerset should be spending more money on buses than it currently is. And it's just worth looking at April. April is the start date really for Bus Back Better. It's when the enhanced partnership swings into action. So it's a crucial date. This is the date those of us who got enthused by Bus Back Better saw coming. It's the opportunity, we were told, for a whole new era for buses. But at the end of March, the bus support grant ends. The concessionary fare scheme, which is a big support to bus operators, ends as well. And if nothing is put in their place, with bus occupancy levels unlikely to go up significantly, particularly with Omicron, without those funding grants put back, and there is no commitment yet from central government to put them back, there is a very real risk of major cuts to bus services just at the time we were promised there would be a whole new future for buses. And why it's important politically is that, of course, at the end of April is May. And in May, we're voting for the new unitary authority. So one would think that the political parties, especially if we're going to see bus cuts and the reaction to those bus cuts, would want to have policies in place which show that they want to help improve buses in Somerset. So whether it's the Conservatives, whether it's the Lib Dems, the Greens or Labour, there is a case to be put to those political parties to propose policies which are sympathetic and supportive of buses. So that's Bus Partnership. Do please stay in touch with us. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, there's a website too. So just stay in touch with us, and we'd like to work with you. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Peter. I hope that gives everybody a flavour and brings you all up to speed as to where we are. The messages there are: use the bus, encourage others to use the bus, and help us with fighting for more funding. I will ask David Redgewell to fill in a little bit more about where we are with the existing grants, and the bad news that, if those disappear, we're in for cuts. And the good news that the bus service improvement plan, if we get a reasonable allocation from the government, does give us the chance to have some improvements. But David has a message for you in lobbying and where you can lobby, particularly where those decisions are going to be made about the funding, not only in the early part of next year, but also later on. David, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Still apologise, I went off call because I'd actually had first group directors on the phone to me at that very point about the very issue we're talking about. Yeah, what's happening at the moment is COVID-19 bus operator recovery grant is £226.5 million between October and April. And it was based on a recovery of the fare blocks to around 80% or 90%. And at the moment, that varies, but about 60% or 70% is where we are in the county and across the West Country. In fact, some would say we're still on some routes, only 50%, I'm afraid to tell you. So basically, we need you to lobby your MPs, any House of Lords members in Somerset, and for those Dorset members on the call, then obviously Chris Loader and the MPs in Dorset. And Chris Loader is quite important because he sits on the Transport Select Committee. I remind everybody he's the West Dorset MP. His boundary comes right into Yeovil. So if you're in his constituency, then please take the trouble to write to him. And also to Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State for Transport, and to Baroness Veer, who is the buses minister. And that is the way we need to move forward. It's no good really lobbying John Woodman so much, or David Fothergill, or Ray Bryant down in Dorset, or Dan Norris, the Metro Mayor just north of Wales in Somerset, in the northern parts of the county of Somerset, because at the end of the day, none of them have any money, and it's reliant on the actual money coming from central government. And that's the point that Doug Clutterbuck has just said to me in the last 5 minutes. Doug, by the way, is the first group manager that covers the northern half of Somerset. Simon Goff covers the southwest bit of Somerset, and Mark Reddy down into Dorset. Those are the three first managers, or directors, I should say, that cover the county and its environs. So that's where we are. And that applies to Southwest coaches. It applies to Fairsaver. It applies to community buses, the Slinky bus, or the buses that Lee Jones runs on behalf of Somerset County Council. So
it's a funding situation. And rather than sit back and stand back and say, oh, well, we should only have a bus service from 7 to 7. I mean, I remember when I lived in Wales, I could get a bus from Yeovil back to Wales about 9 o'clock at night. And there were buses from Wales in the other direction. So, and that is not so long ago, Tony. And we had Sunday services.
I say more than that, we actually had a night bus into Taunton for
absolutely.
a short time. So the message.
So really, we just, the other thing I would just say finally to finish this off is there's the Southwest Peninsula Transport Board, which Somerset's part of, and there's Western Gateway, which Dorset's part of, and Northern Somerset. And we really need to lobby there as well. Now, it's very interesting that Devon, Cornwall and Torbay and Plymouth have joined together to support their bid with Somerset. So they're getting a peninsular bid, so a regional bid they can get to try and get the government to move for the Southwest. And Dan Norris is trying to create that same thing in the north of the county. So I think
the message there is, we as the leaders of Somerset Bus Partnership have taken all those on. But if you have any direct contacts, any ways of, say, members of the House of Lords, who it's not always easy to find who are the local ones who are interested in transport, if you can help. But we also want you to be the local ear on the ground to know about what's going on. And
point, Tony, was just to remind everybody on the call that half the bus services, as Bob has said from the South Wessex Rail Partnership, and Norman and Bob Driscoll said, half the buses contracting to Yeovil are those contracts belonging to Dorset County Council and not Somerset County Council. And that's my final point. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know you've made that point before, and it's obvious that every cross-border route is funded and pushed and supported by the council that isn't Somerset, and very few of them have any sort of joint funding, and certainly none of them where Somerset is the lead. I really, at this point, want to throw the meeting open. We've been going about an hour. I really would like to stop at 9 o'clock. But if anybody has any comments on what they've heard so far and where they think we can do something, Somerset needs something different. I've been saying for 5 years the way we fund it is wrong. The National Bus Strategy looked at face value as so it is something that would attract more government money. But in the end of the day, if you're as skeptical as some people have been, we're going to be back to the same old, it's up to the county will claim other priorities, and we need to keep looking at other ways of funding. Peter mentioned Section 106 funding for new planning applications, community levy funding. There is money out there. There are other ways of looking at it. And then we, as the users and the potential users of the buses, can help Somerset County Council provide a better service, which they have admitted in their bus service improvement plan is needed.
Yeah.
Norman.
Yes, also the environmental message needs to get out. We mentioned a climate emergency. We need to hammer home why you need to be on the bus, because, you're cutting down pollution and all the various reasons. Brighton and Hove did that in the 1980s. I sent you a poster, which I hope you got, which dates back from the 1980s on the environmental use of buses.
Yeah. We need a lot more publicity about our bus services, why we need to use them, and information. And that is part of the bus services improvement plan. But again, we need great ideas on how to publicise. These days, you can publicise very cheaply. It just takes time and effort. And again, that is something that each of you can help with. But we can also lobby Somerset County and the district while they're still in place to keep pushing the ideas of why we need to travel, why we need to think travel, which is Somerset County's new watchword for a campaign they say they're intending to run early in the new year. Anybody else? Jeff, sorry?
Can I just say at this point, please, sorry to interrupt, can I just say at this point, I think I've sort of got the bit that I really needed to have, which was the introduction to where you're up to now. And at this point, if you don't mind, I'll depart. Thank you very much.
Okay, very nice to have you. We will talk about the next meeting and try and, if we can't set a date, we will try and think of when we meet again. Jeff.
What I'm sort of hoping is that if people have things coming out of this, they will come to me, because as you can imagine, this is new and I've got an awful lot on my plate and it's spread over a wide area. So if there are things you particularly want me to help with, give me a shout.
Thank you very much.
Okay then, thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Bob. Jeff.
Talking about getting people back onto the buses, but we need buses to get them back onto.
I know it's a circular argument.
Here in West Hamel, there are 2 buses a week. A lady told me today they send a bus from Pilton to Yeovil, a 12-seater, and 9 people want to get on at one stop in West Hamel. There's not room on the bus for them. So the bus is not big enough.
And then we complain that the buses are too big and can't get round the rural roads. These are the problems of operating a bus service. We can't do it for them, but we can highlight where there are problems. And that's what we need to keep doing.
Yeah, make sure you put that in your template, please.
I will, right, yeah.
Bob Driscoll.
Thank you, Tony. I wondered if I could just have clarification, because I may have missed a trick here. In your presentation, Peter, you mentioned the concessionary bus grant and another grant ending on the 31st of March. And I don't know anything about that.
I will answer, but we do actually have in David Redgewell somebody who is deeply involved with it. David, would you be prepared just to?
Yeah, on the 31st of March, we have at the moment called the COVID-19 Bus Operator Recovery Grant, which is from October this year to the and it's £226.5 million. And that money is given to the operators to top up their revenue to make sure that that's covering the cost of running the bus from the fares they've collected. And that should have been to cover up to 80% of the passengers on the buses to make the difference up to the 100%. But obviously, we're nowhere near that number of passengers. We're probably in the 50s, 60%, maybe 70% in some of the urban areas. So the issue is that grant runs out on the 31st of March. From the 1st of March, the only money we've got at the moment is Bus Back Better, which is £3 billion. But that's not supposed to be used on protecting the famous 51 or 53 between Bridport, Axminster and Weymouth, or the 54 between Yeovil and Langport and Somerset, Langport and Taunton. So just examples, 77 to Wales for Bristol. Those services are supposed to be, by that point, financing themselves. Well, nobody in first group this evening, I've just come off the call with, believes that's going to be the case. So what we're desperately trying to do is get Baroness Veer and Grant Shapps and your great friend Chris Loader, Bob, to extend that bus operator grant through to next summer. And there's an announcement we're expecting from the Treasury in January, but don't hold your breath, because we know they've taken 10% off the train budget last week as well, rail budget. So we've got to push very, very hard on that, extremely hard. And if we don't, we will be in difficulty. After Christmas, first group, Southwest Coaches, Salisbury Reds go ahead, Bournemouth Transport, Stagecoach, just name the ones locally. Will have to sit down with their councils and start to deregister services for April. And nobody in the bus industry in the Southwest tonight wants to do that. And they're very, very worried they may have to do it. So we are.
Concessionary fares, David?
Oh, yes, concessionary fares. Well, good old Grant Shapps and the Treasury has come up with a great wheeze, which I find very unacceptable. From April next year, he wants to claw back 5%. So every month they take 5% of the concessionary fare grant from the government back. So throughout the summer. Now, we don't get an uplift in traffic on concessionary fares in Somerset and Dorset until at least round about June or July, when we get the people on holiday, and that applies to Bristol and Bath and Devon and Cornwall, right across our region, Gloucestershire. So we will lose concessionary fare money at a time when we'll only have mainly the locals and a few people on holiday for Easter. That is very worrying in itself, and that will just cut the revenue to the bus operators. So don't think concessionary fare money is free gifts. It's not. And of course, I also remind you, it's found on the Weymouth line as well with a concession. So it's a difficult situation financially. That's where we are tonight. And that's why we need everybody in this call, even the clerk of the parish council, to write to the local MP and asking them to please, please, please make sure that we keep the bus operator grant, and explain that, of course, the buses are not carrying anywhere near a commercial proposition for the local bus companies. Thanks. That's it. That's it.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tony, it's Peter Simmons here.
Yes, Peter.
I'm sorry I cannot find the symbol for raising my hand.
That's all right.
I've chimed in here because you, or Peter, I forget which, mentioned something in about a quarter of an hour in about transport for disabled people, as we like to refer to them generically, and that there ought to be initiatives to look at the schemes to do for that, because we don't have any such scheme, as far as I know, in my area in the centre of South Somerset at Somerton. But you know, this is a bus back better ought to be looking at people who need wheelchair transport, and transport easily accessible by on a level, and to those with hearing and visual difficulties as well. So I'm not quite sure what I mean, I can think of things I can do, but what do you have to say really on that line?
Shall I come in as a wheelchair user? Because I think that might be where to come in. I'm a wheelchair user, and the government policy is not to develop separate bus services for disabled people, or trains, or coaches. It's to make them fully accessible. Every bus that we run in the county of Somerset, all across the southwest of England today, has to have a wheelchair access on it, has a drop curve, has a ramp, and that goes down. And I can board any bus. I would like castle curbs, of course. And for those that are South Somerset district councils, please get your cleaners to sort the bus station out. The ramps aren't suitable for disabled people tonight, by the way. It's all full of leaves. So there's your message for South Somerset bus station owners.
But 56 in Yeovil doesn't have disabled access.
That is an issue that is a legal issue,
service.
and that is one which should be taken up by the partnership, because that vehicle should be accessible by law. And if it's not, and if I turn up and need that bus, they have to provide one. Just in case I turn up in Bridport, then the number 7 has to send me a disabled bus. Otherwise, I can go to the traffic commissioners to get the service shut down. So the coaches are all wheelchair accessible to London, all Bury's coaches, all National Expresses, and a good lot of the trains that I was involved and I got the scars for it in getting with Bob Driscoll and others, and Sally Faulkner, who's not on the bill, the ramp finally at Dorchester West with the town council and everybody else involved. We finally have a ramp.
Yes.
I don't have a lift at Yeovil Junction yet, guys. If
No.
some of these South Somerset councils want to make a big fuss as well, a nice bus service to Yeovil Junction, Penmill, with a lift at Yeovil Junction would be delightful for disabled people.
Yeah.
But please, we don't want separate
excuse
services.
me, I wonder
Just
if I might
integration.
be allowed to round off my
Yes,
point.
yes, Peter.
Without any further interjections. And
Okay.
I can
Can you
assure
let Peter
all those
finish?
listening this evening that I am fully and absolutely aware of all problems related to persons with a range of disabilities. And I just want to finish this by saying I am not just thinking about the regular buses, although they, of course, should be fully accessible because by the very virtue of the fact that they're subsidised. Where they don't exist, we should be looking at local schemes for moving people about with wheelchair ramps and so on. Small buses, there are such schemes where I come from, but two such schemes where I came from in West Berkshire, very, very well used. Appreciate it's different here, but somebody has to set them up, and a start has to be made on that. So I'm trying to bring a bit of a fresh perspective here, but anyway, so can we have a consensus, please, on how I might, or some support for me to proceed from here on that?
Peter, you're absolutely right, and this is why I mentioned it near the beginning. I looked through, when I read the bus service improvement plan and the Bus Back Better scheme, there was very little in it about disability access, and I think the reason is partly because a lot of it is enshrined in law.
Yes,
if David Bridgewell turns
is.
up in Yeovil and wants to catch the 56, which is the only bus route run by South Somerset District Council, yes, they would have a requirement probably to get a taxi to get him to West Coker. So a lot of it is covered in law, so one wonders what one can do. But I said, we have people in this call who are disabled. We have in the other districts we've been at, and what I did was I said to them, and if you want to join Jonathan even more so, if we have bus champions who are more aware of the needs of disabled people, we should welcome their input and use the bus partnership to lobby the council, the operator, or whoever is responsible for making sure that these things are possible, for clearing the leaves, as David said, or for doing something about the 56 bus, which is an older bus and doesn't have disabled access, doesn't have wheelchair access. A lot of the money that the government were offering in the bus service improvement plan was about getting newer buses, and they would be new zero emission buses, but they obviously, every time you introduce a new bus, it has to comply with the law anyway. So to some extent, the problem will take care of itself as we provide more and more new buses. But that doesn't stop the problems happening today. And I think the Somerset Bus Partnership should be a group that is campaigning for disabled people, whichever way they're disabled, and particularly where the service is not meeting legal requirements, taking things up on disabled people's behalf. And Peter, if you'd like to be part of that, I suggest you get together with Jonathan. David Bridgewell, with his background, will provide an awful lot of background. But I think, as you said, you probably know more about the legal requirements than any of us.
I would say I know more about the physical and practical problems, rather than the legal. Yeah.
Okay. Carol.
Hi, I think you might have answered my question in passing.
Okay.
Yes, I wanted to raise electric buses, that we need to really push for those.
Yep.
And you mentioned that zero emission buses were part of the new plan. So.
Yes, they're part of the bus strategy, the Bus Back Better thing that was produced in March. And it was quite obvious from discussions we had with Baroness Veer and Grant Shapps at the beginning that they wanted to see proposals for zero emission buses. So they're included in Somerset's bus service improvement plan. My gut feeling is that that's one of the reasons why it's so oversubscribed and there isn't enough money.
Yeah.
Jonathan. Jonathan, did you want to come back on what I was saying earlier, or was it something else?
Sorry, no, I just wanted to say that I would be more than happy to get involved and try and help the disabled community access the buses better. As a wheelchair user myself, life can be challenging, and I would like to see better access for everyone, not just the disabled community.
Indeed. We have about 10 minutes left before it's 9 o'clock, so I intend to finish by then. I think some people are leaving anyway. Jevon, was there something you wanted to say?
Yes, just that people do get very hesitant in some instances. Like on our Travel Buddy project, we do get like people who stay in home and cancel their introductions to certain routes, for example. So like if this project was to invite disabled people, you have to forgive them and be flexible and get their emails can be another thing in this meeting, and the technological sides, to not be hesitant onto online is another matter, and wariness to being online are other matters should we do these meetings again. Other things, going on to electrified buses, there has been in fact a bus this week unexpectedly in Bristol from Newport Bus, which appeared through Ford's Causeway, where I'm to at the moment, into Bristol on service T7, which was one thing. As for Somerset, well, there have been very few around, but all could come very nice. That's all I've got to say for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Jevon, and thank you for being with us. Dave Osborne.
Yeah, thought I'd better take myself off mute first.
Good idea.
I said I am involved in researching campaigns for citizens' advice in South Somerset, and we have wanted to campaign on public transport issues a number of times in the past, but a lot of clients don't mention public transport as a problem. So, if you're in the disabled community or whoever, and you go into places like citizens' advice with a problem, don't forget to mention all of your problems so that we can record it and act on it.
We are so reticent about complaining, and that is, we are learning, I think, that you only get improvements by actually getting some complaints in, getting some comments in. And that's why we've set this group up, so that you can not only complain on your own behalf, but you can talk to other people, hear their problems, and try and get them amplified. And that is why we need a local support group like this. If you know of anybody else who'd like to join this group, do tell them about us, send them to our website. Let us hear more people. If you want to set up a local support group, that's absolutely fine. We have people who've done it, so we can help if you need it. If we can grow this group to cover all 500 parish and town council areas in Somerset, that would be wonderful. We've got to 100 so far. I think Peter said he was surprised. I was surprised about the level of support this group is getting, and the way I see it as the way forward to lobbying for improved bus services in Somerset. Lucy's putting up our contact details. Make sure you get them. You log into the Facebook group, look at the website, make suggestions for the website if you want. Just keep in touch with each other and with ourselves, and see if we can do something about the disastrous state of buses in Somerset.
Tony, can I make one plea tonight? And it's something
Go on,
I've just come
David.
off the call about to everybody in the room. Can you please make sure that the buses you travel on, because of COVID-19, trains for that matter, regulations, that those buses are being washed and cleaned properly? It's absolutely essential that if we're to track people back, with all the government commercials at the moment and discussion about the African variants, that those buses are washed, cleaned and kept clean. And that is a government diktat now to the bus operators and to the rail operators. So if we want to attract more passengers at the moment, then cleanliness of the bus stations, bus shelters and buses is very coaches are very high on the government's agenda. They came on officially back on the agenda last Sunday. Thank you.
Yeah. My experience of buses and trains has been good. As you say, there are still bus stations and bus shelters that are not. And that's partly because people will not take the responsibility for them, which is something else we are campaigning for. Thank you all very much. I'd like to meet again sometime late January. If you think that's a good idea, somebody thinks, no, it ought to be far sooner or far later, let me know. So I would guess round about the 24th of January. Looks like a good date to me.
Should have some idea whether you've got the grant or not, Tony, by then.
Yes,
and what the government's
hopefully we will have. If we know
and the
we're
only other
here.
one to put on anybody can answer our question. I've just had an email from somebody telling me that somebody's turned Taunton bus station into a car park. If that's true, perhaps somebody can come back to me because they don't have planning permission.
I think that's an old story that was going around about 6 weeks ago.
That's come through today, Tony. That's come through today. So I'm just wanting to check that somebody isn't sneaking cars in there without any consent.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. We haven't got people from Taunton in here, so I don't know.
If Tony, if anybody would like a set of the slides we presented, I know Bob Driscoll's asked for a set, but if they put their email address in the chat, we'll send a set of the slides to them.
And I think Lucy said something.
If I may, via the chair, Peter, it was Sarah who had sent it to me, and I think she meant to send it to everybody, but it only came to me, which is why I forwarded it to you. But yes, please add me to the list, like I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you all very much. We'll see you again in January, if not before.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
And that's thank you and good night from me. Thank you all for coming. It's brilliant to see so many people wanting to get involved.
It is, and thank you for that.
Good night, Tony. Good night, all.
Good night, Jonathan. I didn't check the maximum number. Were we? We were over 25
at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Norman, you can go now if you want.
Yeah. Did you get a package I sent to you this week?
Yes, sorry. Yes, I've got it.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, just checking. Okay. Bye for now then.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. I'm going to close it down, Tony.
I think so. And we meet again at 11:30.
Look forward to
See you then.
it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.